Good evening. It's just gone 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. The Vatican has announced the Pope Francis has died at the age of 88. The announcement came about 1 hour ago from official Vatican media confirming that the Pope had passed. We know that the Pope had been battling a number of serious illnesses during his time as head of the Catholic Church. Of course, recently there was a lot of concern about his health, but he has been in public since that point. And really less than 24 hours ago, he was meeting there with US Vice President J.D. Vance, and we actually got some of those last pictures of him from earlier today. We're obviously getting in a lot of reaction, as you can understandably imagine, from world leaders, political leaders, religious leaders right across the nation and the world. We're going to bring those to you throughout our special breaking rolling coverage this evening, and of course we'll continue our coverage for you tomorrow, and as long as we need to, of course, before there is the a new pope comes in, of course, at the end of all this. But obviously, many people, maybe some, maybe not shocked because of his health, but also he did seem to be on the mend over the past few weeks, and so this has maybe come out of the blue for some, especially again when he was with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance mere hours ago. You can actually see on your screen now. This was JD Vance, and you can see there Pope Francis. Obviously, a lot of people have noted his face, his condition since that point, since recent months, that is, and his health. But he was obviously smiling. He was talking with JD Vance. There were obviously some recent reports about his thoughts, and they had some discussions which kind of gained some media attention and some certainly some online attention. But by all accounts, he was there. He was speaking with the Vice President J.D. Vance. I believe Italian Prime Minister Meloni was also there. We don't have those pictures for you, but I believe she was also there. Again, this was, I think, 16 hours ago. These images were posted by the US Vice President's official social media account. We got these off Twitter. So again, this is seemingly come out of the blue, and this is a live shot. If we can just bring it up for you, this is a live shot of the Vatican right now. You can see, obviously, just at the bottom of your screen, a lot of people will be congregating, as you can understand, a lot of Catholics and other people who are, again, many, I imagine, still would be shocked by this news and by these developments. We're going to continue to follow this, but just for a moment, we'll listen in to the Vatican at the moment. A live shot there, you can see. We'll listen in there. want to take you now to the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, who is speaking live.
A billion people from all nations and every walk of life go with Pope Francis to his rest. Born in Argentina in 1936 and ordained a priest in 1969, Pope Francis' fellow cardinals elected him Pope in 2013. His was a papacy of firsts, the first Pope to hail from the Americas, the first Jesuit Pope, and the first to take the name of that great champion of the poor, St. Francis of Assisi. Pope Francis' compassion embraced all humanity, and today he will be mourned by Catholics and non-Catholics alike. He urged us to remember all we hold in common, and he asked the world to hear the cry of the earth, our common home. He invited world leaders to join him and, to quote him, emerge from the dark night of wars and environmental devastation in order to turn our common future into the dawn of a new and radiant day. He was very much a modernist. His message that he sent out echoed in our region during his historic visit to Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Singapore and Timor-Leste. The first Pope from the Southern Hemisphere was close to the people of Australia. For Australian Catholics, he was a devoted champion and loving father. Pope Francis lived out his faith and vocation in word and deed. He was truly inspirational. In his modest way of life and at his weekly audiences, he demonstrated his commitment to peace, equality and inclusion. Pope Francis's love for humanity was powerful and profound. The memory and example of his compassion will long endure. As we mourn his death, we celebrate the gift of his life and presence among us, and we hold on to the resonant truth of Pope Francis's final Easter homily. The light quietly shines forth, even though we are in darkness. The promise of new life and a world finally set free awaits us, and a new beginning, however impossible it might seem, can take us by surprise, for Christ has triumphed over death. May God welcome Pope Francis to eternal life. I have asked the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet that all flags from the Commonwealth Government of Australia will fly at half-mast tomorrow as a sign of respect, and my sincere condolences to everyone who, for tonight, it will be a very difficult evening. Thank you.
That was Prime Minister Anthony Albanese speaking live there following the death of Pope Francis. You just heard from the Prime Minister making a statement there, and he did also release a statement on social media, which will just work to bring up for you now. The Prime Minister, the Prime Minister said in part that Australian Catholics and faithful around the world give their thanks for the life of their Holy Father, Pope Francis, Bishop of Rome. Today, the prayers of more than 1 billion people from all nations and every walk of life go with Pope Francis to his rest. He added that as we mourn his death, we celebrate the gift of his life and presence among us, and we hold on to the resonant truth of Pope Francis's final Easter homily, where Pope Francis said, quote, "The light quietly shines forth even through we are in darkness. The promise of a new life and world finally set free awaits us, and a new beginning, however impossible might seem, can take us by surprise, for Christ has triumphed over death." That was a statement from the Prime Minister. The opposition leader, Peter Dutton, released a statement a few minutes beforehand where he said, on behalf of the coalition, I express my condolences to Australians of Catholic and Christian faith upon the sad news of the 226th Pontiff. His Holiness Pope Francis served God with the utmost devotion throughout his life. He was the first Pope, the first Latin American Pope. He lived frugally and simply. Above all else, he was driven by Christ's values of mercy and forgiveness. He emphasised those values in his last Christmas address, saying, God's mercy can do all things. It unties every knot. It tears down every wall of division. God's mercy dispels hatred and the spirit of revenge, adding, with God, may Pope Francis rest in peace. That was the opposition leader, Peter Dutton, and we, of course, expect a lot more statements from leaders around the world. You would expect to hear, of course, from the United States soon-ish, obviously given time zones at the moment, but of course J.D. Vance, who literally was one of the last people to meet him. We met him about 16 hours ago, as we were just showing you before, and so we expect those statements shortly-ish. But look, there's obviously a lot that people are still working out, but again, those are the statements you just heard there. We'll probably give you a replay of what the Prime Minister's statement was as well when we get a moment to. But again, you can just see those images. Obviously, that this wasn't a final image. We know that Pope Francis has had his health problems in recent times. That's been well documented. There was only a few months ago, there was serious concern at the time for his immediate health, serious grave concern. He was in a critical condition, if I recall correctly, and we were getting those Vatican statements. But he has been seen in public more than a few times since that point. And again, you can see there him meeting with J.D. Vance. Again, only this about this morning Australian time. So again, these images published about 16 hours ago, roughly. Look, obviously, still a lot of talk about this, but as the Prime Minister and the opposition leader said, Australian Catholics and those of Christian faith, and of course right around the world, will be mourning at the moment. A lot of people will obviously be gathering at the Vatican for this, and so we'll just cut back live now. This is a live shot of the Vatican at the moment. We'll listen back in. you're just listening with our Six News coverage, we just also got a statement. We just heard from, obviously, the Prime Minister speaking live there, and we got a statement from the opposition leader. But we also just heard from the Victorian Premier, Jacinta Allan. She said, quote, "Across Australia and around the world, Catholics are united as they mourn the death of His Holiness Pope Francis, Bishop of Rome. Pope Francis was the leader of the Church and leader of the world. He was a tireless advocate for the poor, a relentless voice for the marginalised. He believed that caring for the sick was part of the Church's essential mission, and that compassion for the vulnerable was core to the human condition. He shared a message of peace, courage, and humility, a message that has never mattered more. I offer my sincere condolences to Catholic communities across Victoria as they grieve his profound loss. May he rest in eternal peace." So that was Victorian Premier Jacinta Allan. Really, just a few moments ago. There again, we would expect quite a few statements to begin to come in. But obviously, as you know, even with his illness, a lot of people really were shocked at this. He even as the newest pope, he is very well known, very well known. Obviously for a number of reasons, including his advocacy, and that's gained him a lot of praise over the years, even by many non-Catholics and many irreligious people, and certainly he's in a position where they are, a lot of people are very much shocked. So we'll still get that, but again, you just heard from, Jacinta Allan there, the Premier of Victoria, and we just did hear from the opposition leader, and we just did hear from the Prime Minister. I'll get a readout part of the Prime Minister's statement again. He noted that the first Pope from the Southern Hemisphere was close to the people of Australia. For Australian Catholics, he was a devoted champion and loving father. Pope Francis lived out his faith and vocation in word and deed. In his modest way of life and at his weekly audiences, he demonstrated his commitment to peace, equality and inclusion. And the opposition leader, Peter Dutton, saying His Holiness Pope Francis served God with the utmost devotion throughout his life. He was the first Latin American Pope. He lived frugally and simply, and above all else, he was driven by Christ's values of mercy and forgiveness. He emphasized those values in his last Christmas address, saying, quote, "God's mercy can do all things. It unties every knot. It tears down every wall of division. God's mercy dispels hatred and the spirit of revenge." End quote. "With God, may Pope Francis rest in peace." End quote. That was opposition leader Peter Dutton. We'll take you back now to the Vatican. You're still with us here on Six News as we continue our special live rolling coverage following the death of Pope Francis at the age of 88. We just heard there, of course, from the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. We've also heard from opposition leader Peter Dutton. We just did also get a statement from the Premier of Victoria, Jacinta Allan. Look, we're expecting a lot more political leaders and religious leaders here at home and, of course, right across the world to give their thoughts and their condolences in the minutes and the hours to come. With us now on the line, Six News Chief Reporter Roman McKinnon. Roman, good evening to you.
Good evening, Leo.
So obviously a lot of people mourning right now, a very sad day for Catholics and Christians right around the world. Also, of course, for a lot of people who maybe weren't religious or were of a different faith, but did respect the Pope. And we are seeing a lot of their reaction come in, aren't we?
Yeah, no doubt. And right across the world, this news has absolutely rocked Catholics, especially during the time of Easter, a time of so sacred to many Catholics. I just want to read out what Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has just said. He spoke a short time ago with what you just saw and also released a statement. He said, Australian Catholics and faithful around the world give thanks for the life of their Holy Father, Pope Francis, Bishop of Rome. Today, the prayers of more than 1 billion people from all nations and every walk of life go with Pope Francis to his rest. He was a papacy of firsts, the first pope to hail from the Americas, Latin America, that is, the first, the first to take the name of a great champion of the poor, Saint Francis of Assisi. Going on to say a number of other things, also saying that Australians were close to the Pope. Also from Liberal leader Peter Dutton, he said, on behalf of the coalition, I express my condolences to Australians of Catholic and Christian faith upon the sad news of the deaths of the 266th Pontiff. His Holiness Pope Francis served God with the utmost devotion throughout his life. He was the first Pope from the Juiced order and the first Latin American Pope, going on to say he lived frugally and simply. So both leaders releasing a statement as well, including from Victorian Premier Jacinta Allan. Across Victoria and around the world, Catholics are united as they mourn the death of His Holiness Pope Francis, Bishop of Rome. Pope Francis was a leader of the church and a leader of the world. He was a tireless advocate for the poor, a relentless voice for the marginalized. She also went on to say a number of other things, including he shared a message of peace, courage, and humility. As I mentioned, and as we just saw Prime Minister Anthony Albanese speaking a short time ago on the campaign trail, but the reaction has really rocked Catholics and Christians around the world. We've seen photos and images coming in of people embracing each other at St. Peter's Square in the Vatican City, as well as, a number of world leaders right across the world. And of course, as the world, particularly America, wakes up to this news, we'll see a lot more reaction as the night goes on and as we head into tomorrow morning.
Yeah, definitely. And look, there's a lot of reaction as you said, and we'll wait to hear from, of course, U.S. President Donald Trump, especially Vice President J.D. Vance, as you said, right? He met him a mere 16 hours ago. I think the images were published, something like that. And so, which is extraordinary. I mean, these are some of, if not the final photos we have of Pope Francis at the moment. We also just heard from Chris Minns, as you said, the New South Wales Premier, saying that Pope Francis understood that grace lives with every human being, whether they were born rich, poor, high or low. Through the strength of his example and the quiet passion of his words, he showed us the power of the great Catholic teachings. And look, you're right, Roman. We'll be hearing a lot more very soon. We again just did hear from the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, and we're awaiting kind of more statements at the moment. And look, it's as you said, Roman, and we don't want to bring the election necessarily into this. It's well beyond a political thing, and distraction isn't the right word. But obviously, leaders are understandably going to be focused on this tomorrow, which is the first day of pre-poll, it must be said, and so there's going to be a lot of focus on that, which makes sense because I mean, in terms of, I'm just thinking to our careers, I think this is only at the level of the death of Queen Elizabeth II, in terms of significance and something that's interrupting, I guess, daily lives for many people, even again, non-Catholics and non-Christians.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just saw something from US Vice President JD Vance. He was the last world leader to actually, be with him and meet with him. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up what he had to say. Here we go. He said in a post to X, he said, "quote I just learnt of the passing of Pope Francis. My heart goes out to the millions of Christians all over the world who loved him. I was happy to see him yesterday, though he was obviously very ill, but I'll always remember him for the below homily he gave in the very uh, early days." So that's US Vice President JD Vance there, as I just mentioned, but I'll always remember him for the homily he gave in the very early days of COVID. It was really quite beautiful. We're also hearing of a Italian football match postponed following Pope Francis's death. Italy's top flight soccer league has postponed all of its Monday fixtures following the death of Pope Francis. Those dates of the rearranged fixtures will be announced in due course. As I just mentioned there, photos coming in of people embracing each other in Vatican City. It's around 11 o'clock in Rome at the moment. So obviously, almost the middle of the day, lots of people out and about. So police are managing the area around the Vatican City. What we do know from a statement from the Vatican City said that he died around 7:35 a.m. local time. That was around 3:35 Australian Eastern Standard Time. So 4-ish hours ago that this occurred, and obviously people in Italy are dealing with this as they do. But as I mentioned before, people across the east coast of America and the Americas, especially when Pope Francis was of Latin American descent, those areas would be definitely feeling it. Also, the Sydney Catholic Archbishop has reacted. He said that the Pope was of many first, so a touching tribute from many people, who was determined to lead the Catholic Church in reaching out to those on the margins, the poor, elderly, disabled, unborn, refugees, and prisoners. He also went on to say that Pope Francis passionately decried views and actions contrary to human dignity and flourishing. So lots of different things are coming out from world leaders. Also, his final message for peace around about 22 hours ago on Easter Sunday, he posted to social media. He said, "I would like us to renew our hope that peace is possible. He also went on to say that may the light of peace radiate throughout the Holy Land and the entire world. So that pretty much sums up, the person he kind of was, calling for peace as his last, official final message.
Absolutely. His calls for peace have been something that has earned him so much widespread praise and devotion again from many non-Catholics. I mean, many of his recent messaging was, of course, about Gaza, and he had earned a lot of praise for that. I believe, he'd even had copped some criticism for his really repeated statements calling for peace in Gaza, and of course he'd called for peace along in Ukraine. If we're just talking about some recent conflicts there, and many other examples. Of course, I just want to quickly read out the official Vatican statement, which, as you said, came in. Well, it was released just on about 5 our time, Australian Eastern Standard. That is, which was, dearest brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow I must announce the death of of our Holy Father Francis at 7:35 this morning. The Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and of his church. He taught us to live with the values of the gospel with fidelity, courage, and universal love, especially in favour of the poorest and most marginalised. With immense gratitude for his example as a true disciple of the Lord Jesus, we commend the soul of Pope Francis to the infinite merciful love of the one and true in God. And again, look, we know, Roman, that the Pope, in February, a lot of headlines about his condition. We're getting those daily updates, which were really concerning at the time. And, he was he was on the mend enough to be in public and be meeting, because he was in a critical condition at one point, right? It was getting to serious concern. And so, look, at the age of 88, and with health issues being long-standing, I don't want to say it's necessarily not a surprise, but also it is fairly out of the blue. I mean, if people were expecting him to pass this year, it was going to be 2 months ago when he was in hospital at the time, not hours after meeting the US Vice President.
Yeah, exactly. And it shows, what he had to go through in the last few months to push through, obviously, passing away earlier today. But what happens now is something I would like to touch on, that cardinals will now be summoned to Rome to choose his successor. So, according to the tradition, the Pope's death will be ritually confirmed by Vatican officials, and 9 days of mourning will be declared. The burial usually happens between the 4th and the 6th day. Popes are usually buried at St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City, but Francis has said he wanted to be at the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore, all these European words that are outside the Vatican walls. Once in Rome, cardinals will go through the process of a papal conclave to vote on who the next pope will be. Cardinals are forbidden from having any contact with anyone outside the conclave, at risk of excommunication. So, obviously, very official proceedings, and something that hasn't happened in Vatican City for quite some time.
Yeah, it's interesting because, obviously when Pope Benedict stepped down, it's not the usual thing for a pope to step down, right? We saw this. It was over a decade ago, but look, that's obviously people's most recent memories. And actually, if we remember, and he wasn't the incumbent, so possibly less attention. It also happened on New Year's Eve, but Pope Benedict, or the then former Pope Benedict, he died on I think it was New Year's Eve 2022, and so obviously there was that. But look, we've now got this, and we've now got this for lack of the official terminology, the election for a new pope, which will garner significant attention, as of course it will. And look, we can have, in the days to come and the weeks to come, there will be obviously the broader conversations about whether there's going to be more of a modernist like Francis or a traditionalist, and there's many strong views on that. But Pope Francis very clearly was a modernist in many regards, and that again had earned him lots of favour. We're going to continue to cover this all night. Chief Reporter Roman McKinnon, thank you very much.
Thanks, Leo.
And we just want to show you now a bit of what the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said a few minutes ago.
Today, the prayers of more than 1 billion people from all nations and every walk of life go with Pope Francis to his rest. Born in Argentina in 1936 and ordained a priest in 1969, Pope Francis' fellow cardinals elected him Pope in 2013. His was a papacy of firsts, the first Pope to hail from the Americas, the first Jesuit Pope, and the first to take the name of that great champion of the poor, St. Francis of Assisi. Pope Francis' compassion embraced all humanity, and today he will be mourned by Catholics and non-Catholics alike. He urged us to remember all we hold in common, and he asked the world to hear the cry of the earth, our common home. He invited world leaders to join him and, to quote him, emerge from the dark night of wars and environmental devastation in order to turn our common future into the dawn of a new and radiant day. He was very much a modernist. His message that he sent out echoed in our region during his historic visit to Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Singapore and Timor-Leste. The first Pope from the Southern Hemisphere was close to the people of Australia. For Australian Catholics, he was a devoted champion and loving father. Pope Francis lived out his faith and vocation in word and deed. He was truly inspirational. In his modest way of life and at his weekly audiences, he demonstrated his commitment to peace, equality and inclusion. Pope Francis's love for humanity was powerful and profound. The memory and example of his compassion will long endure. As we mourn his death, we celebrate the gift of his life and presence among us, and we hold on to the resonant truth of Pope Francis's final Easter homily. The light quietly shines forth, even though we are in darkness. The promise of new life and a world finally set free awaits us, and a new beginning, however impossible it might seem, can take us by surprise, for Christ has triumphed over death. May God welcome Pope Francis to eternal life. I have asked the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet that all flags from the Commonwealth Government of Australia will fly at half-mast tomorrow as a sign of respect. And my sincere condolences to everyone who, for tonight, it will be a very difficult evening. Thank you.
you.